Hi, I'm Jay Polaki, and this is the HR Bytes podcast, where HR practitioners share their think globally and act locally digital HR agenda. Welcome to another episode of HR Bytes. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I am excited to bring Njon Sanders insights to the HR Bytes community today. Welcome to the show, John. How are you doing today?
Great, thanks. Very excited to be here.
Well, I am really excited about all of the insights that you're going to share from the work that you do in the small to medium business space within the HR function, and also your insights over the past 20 plus years being in HR. John, I'm going to start off by asking you to briefly tell us what got you started in HR and what's exciting you in HR at the present moment.
Yeah, I come from, I guess, what would be considered more of a non-traditional or a spiral path into HR and people ops. I started in finance, and I was managing facilities and IT in addition, but always ended up with some piece of people ops being put on my plate. And that kind of grease the wheels. My first dedicated HR role was a disaster, and I swore I would just never do it again. I didn't have a good feeling for it, but inevitably the next roles I had each had an additional piece of HR on it, and that's where I really started to learn. Okay, I'm talented at this. I enjoy this. And since then, I've made the transition fully. And although I vacillated a bit in a few years back, I've really landed firmly on people ops as my when I grow up job.
Well, we all are certainly very, very, excited about what's ahead for HR, right? And we've certainly grown in the HR space with all of
Yeah.
the automation and AI that's being thrown at us. So, without further ado, my first question is, how do you think we should be approaching all of this HR automation and AI for the HR function? And how do you think we can better prepare our function for this increased use of automation and AI in our work?
There are so many avenues right now, and it's such a broad and wide topic. I guess the best would be to explain how I use AI in the day to day. There's so much automation and AI already baked into the tools that we already use. It kind of goes under the radar. But I think getting people more familiar with those tools, but also I use a lot of LLMs just for like a thought partner. I use a lot of the mainstream ones the ones that give us like well structured frameworks and to draft policies and communications. But a lot of the newer, more interactive and conversational models, I think, are even better thought partners and can collaborate better by drilling deeper into what we're trying to get at, more by asking questions rather than just presenting, a field of here's a templated list of responses. I like the way that a lot of the new models are probing and asking questions.
Well, there's a lot of practical advice out there in what's called prompt engineering. It's pegged to be this great time saver and to kind of bring a lot of efficiencies into our work. Is it still early to say that that these tools are really going to help us save time and effort, or do you think that there is some value in these tools today?
Yeah, I think there's value. Undeniably, there's value as long as we keep things into perspective and we're using the tools in an informed way and we're leveraging things as best we can. Um, we can use them definitely more efficiently to allow us to step away from doing some of the grunt work, some of the heads down work that we're so used to doing. So having those extra tools helps us move more away from that and more into spending more and better time interacting with humans, which to me is the better part of what it is that we do.
Well, that's a great segue into my next question, actually, because, in the midst of all this, how do we keep that human touch, right? There's so much technological evolution around us and revolution around us. Are we going to lose contact with the humans while being the H in HR and playing that pivotal role in an organization where we are the people's people?
Yeah, and going back to my past comment, I really feel really strongly that these tools are what's going to be crucial in allowing us to build more value in, on one side, knowing how to use the tools and knowing how to kind of trudge through the difficult grunt work, pulling reports and parsing data, um, helping to create policies in a polished and consistent format, but also helps us flex on the other side in that now that we have these tools, we can actually make better connections with people. And to me, again, that's the major aspect of what draws me into HR, is having those human connections and being of service to, to my peers and to my customers.
Well, NVIDIA's CEO definitely thinks that AI will be smarter than humans in 5 years before 2030. At least that's what he's been saying. What do you foresee for HR this year and beyond? And do you think we should aim for all of those big, hairy, audacious goals this year, or take it slow?
Yeah, I'm a little on the fence about AI being smarter than humans in the true sense. Um, I know they can perform a lot of tasks better and faster than humans, but unless there's some dystopian sci-fi era of the machines thing that happens, I think people will still be responsible for making the decisions, even if they're delegated, to be executed by AI. And the thought of assigning accountability to an AI is still a little far off for me yet. But that said, transitioning some of the complex tasks that we do, where humans have proven where we're not as good, like I think driving cars is a good example. That would get my thumbs up. I'm just hoping that we'll continue uh, in a measured and in a measured way that focuses on people over profits. So I think we see AI as kind of the cash cow now, but it's going to be a balance of figuring out ways to make it improve people's lives as opposed to just increasing profits.
Well, you've been in the HR space in small and medium sized workplaces as well as large enterprises. What are you most worried about this year for the HR function in general? And if you had a magic wand, what would desire as the ideal solution to eliminate this problem?
Yeah, I think taking it back to AI is important, and there are a couple issues in just understanding and using AI to help elevate what we do. I guess a couple of examples would be there are a lot of ATS products that use automation for pre-screening and triage, and unfortunately, they tend to eliminate candidates with less obvious experience, and they only go for the lowest hanging fruit. Um, and they also can't really read between the lines or tell nonsense from some of the hidden treasures that are out there. The way a seasoned sourcer or a recruiter might be able to do. So it loses that aspect of it. But on the flip side of that, there are still a lot of people who fear AI or anything related to machine learning, especially in the HR space, because maybe someone told them once, that's how they get your information. So there's still a societal love and fear, and a lot of these folks are are getting left behind, and especially in our industry, it's going to be key to start upping our game and getting more educated. So for both, it becomes a question of demonstrating the potential, but helping people understand the limitations and the potentials and how those work together with the tools that we use.
Well, you said it. So, what's one piece of advice you have for HR professionals who are looking to adopt or learn new technology? I mean, we all are, being uh, kind of put in a place where we either reskill or we kind of just fizzle out in our careers. So what's one piece of advice that you think that we should all be doing when we are adopting all of this new technology? And what do you wish for HR teams in general, in for how to be prepared for all of this new new requirements of the job, the new KSAs for an HR practitioner today? How do you envision this for our HR colleagues, and what is your advice for them?
Yeah, I guess the what I found most useful is to play around with the mainstream LLMs. Um, there's a ton of LinkedIn learning classes, and they're literally hundreds. But it's important that people don't think that they need to be, an expert in generative AI. Tomorrow it's not this daunting. You don't need to get a certification. You don't need to go through all those steps. But just being familiar with the tools, find things relevant to you personally is another avenue that I, always recommend for people. Try some queries on a hobby or a side project. I use them all the time to learn how to take better care of my plants or to get me unstuck from whatever game I'm playing. Uh, or maybe nerd out and think about, what AI tools or integrations exist for a lot of these tools, the HRIS tools and the platform tools that we use every day. There's just multiple points of entry.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've been trying things in my garden, just asking all of these Gen AI tools about certain stuff, right? Like, what kind of weed is this? And is it going to really take over my garden this spring?
Exactly.
Um, so that brings us to the funner part of today's conversation where our audience gets to connect with you, our question connection round. Ready?
Yes.
So, who's one person that you've met or gained in your network this past year in the HR or HR tech space that you'd recommend to the community?
Hands down, Tamika Green from Hey HR. I came across her on YouTube. I was looking at, I had some questions on credentialing, and her channel popped up, and she's perfect person to know for anyone who's either relatively new in HR or looking to make a change or just has questions around education or certifications. She covers a lot of the more granular topics, leave administration, um, training, and the specifics of roles, but also some of the more heavy topics, the bigger topics, DEI, company culture, and all in a super approachable manner. So my teams, I always it becomes almost a requirement to brush up on Hey HR and follow in Tamika's footsteps. She's really an inspiration.
Wonderful. We'll include her LinkedIn connection in the show notes here. What's your favorite
Fantastic.
HR podcast or HR technology or HR related book that you'd recommend?
There's actually a two book series that I really, really value. The first one came out a couple years ago. They're both by Lily Zhang. The first one is DEI Deconstructed, and then its follow up companion is Reconstructing DEI. And they break DEI down into simple components that explain kind of the why and how of implementing systemic DEI in our modern workplaces, why it's important, and but also how to overcome some of the pushback and the nonsense that's become almost normalized in the country in recent months. So very important books to continue, our path of promoting systemic DEI, which sometimes just has to happen under the radar without the tags or the the negative association. So those are absolutely top of my list.
Absolutely. You mentioned LinkedIn Learning courses. Are there any courses that you would recommend within the HR technology or HR tech space?
Yes. Um, Actually, with LinkedIn Learning, they have an AI tool to help select courses for you. That's really powerful, and it's an amazing tool. And it led me to one of my favorite courses. One of the first ones I took on LinkedIn Learning. It's called Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging with Pat Waters. But there are so many other courses. I've taken a lot on basics of compensation, total rewards. It's really helped me up my game. But that AI tool is a really good and powerful one to help build a path to build more of a comprehensive understanding around any concept that we're most interested in.
Absolutely. AI again, right there.
Yeah, yeah.
So that brings us to kind of the last question, where I wanted to ask you if you were to add a song to our playlist. We have an HR
Mm.
playlist for working from anywhere on Spotify, and we call it Gecko's Grooves. What would that song be?
There's a song, there's a track that I put on if I get stuck and I fall into a rut of self doubt. I'm not sure how to move forward. There's a song called Velha Infancia, which means old childhood, and it's by a group called Tribalistas from Brazil. And it's a love song, but the rhythm and the kind of repetition within it really are motivating, and they get me moving, and they just help pull me forward. So that's kind of my motivation track, my go-to.
Wonderful. We'll add that to the playlist immediately. How do you
Fantastic.
enjoy how do you enjoy giving back to the HR community? You do a lot of work in the HR space on the West Coast, but how do you specifically enjoy giving back to the HR community in general?
Yeah, it's all about networking, I think, within our spaces, and I think you're, the best example of that in your approachability and the way that you network and you look for opportunities in people. But joining those professional networks is key. I'm also a serial volunteer, so some of the work I do is self development. In my volunteer work, I sit on the board of a nonprofit, and that really kind of helps me stretch a lot of, I don't know, the HR muscles that I'd like to stretch in with a much lower at a much lower risk. But looking for opportunities to engage with people and make those connections is really key. So networking, I think, is the best way to give back, and really, looking for opportunities to pull others forward, because it creates community.
Well, thank you so much for joining me on the HR Bytes podcast, John. It's been a real pleasure knowing you for the past couple of years and getting to know more of you as we interact, of course, on our LinkedIn, community. Uh, if our audience would like to get in touch with you, what would be the best way for them to do so?
It's easiest always to find me by name, and by LinkedIn. I'm very easy to get a hold of and responsive via LinkedIn. My name is super easy to search. It's Njon, last name Sanders. So it's pretty unique, makes me easy to find, but LinkedIn's the go-to, and I really look forward to uh, being introduced to a wide range of people from this experience. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again. Thank you, everyone, for being here. The HR Bytes community is always open and welcoming to anyone who'd like to join us here on LinkedIn or on Facebook. So do join us. And thank you, Njon, so much again for being here today. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you soon on another episode of HR Bytes. Listen on your favorite podcast channels and watch us on YouTube. Follow us on social. We are on LinkedIn, X, Instagram, Facebook, and Threads. Join our budding community on LinkedIn and Facebook. Ask, answer, advice, and more.